Just going live, and I think we are now live on Facebook. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session: Cricket, Terrorism, and Security in Contemporary South Asia. And the pretext of this today's talk is the historic win that India had recently in Australia. Five states, often otherwise politically turbulent, strategically sensitive, and ethnically divided region, that is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan, constitute the essence of South Asian cricket culture and economy. Led by India at the international level since the 1990s, in his lecture, Professor Kaushik Bandyopadhyay will talk about the spectra of terrorism and security as a central non-cricketing factor in the sport's evolution in contemporary South Asia. Cricket has been affected by political violence and terrorism in some of these countries since the 1980s, due in particular to the civil war in Sri Lanka, the rise of Taliban in Afghanistan, and the growth of terrorist elements and camps in Pakistan. Today, he'll try to argue that terrorism and security fears have not only compromised, sometimes halted, the organization of the game in certain countries, including Pakistan and Afghanistan, but also transformed the nature of cricketing relations in the region. Professor Kaushik Bandyopadhyay is currently a professor of history at West Bengal State University. He completed his MA in history and PhD from the University of Calcutta. With a teaching experience of over 22 years, his specialization lies in modern South Asian history. And his area of research includes the social and cultural history of modern India, popular culture in South Asia, history of sports, and contemporary South Asia. He is the author of several books, including Mahatma on the Pitch, Gandhi and Cricket in India. I highly recommend everybody to just check that book out on Amazon. And Sports Culture and Nation Perspectives from Indian Football and South Asian Cricket, Bangladesh Playing Sports Culture Nation, Scoring off the Field, Football Culture in Bengal, 1911 to 1980, and the Social History of Indian Football, Striving to Score. And he also edited several books, including Face to Face, Enduring Rivalry in World Soccer, Soccer in Society, Heroes, Icons, Legends, Legacies of Great Men in World Soccer, Modernities in Asian Perspective, Why Minorities Play or Don't Play Soccer, A Global Exploration, and French Nations in World Soccer. So, sir, it is a proud honor to host you this evening to talk about this very interesting subject, that is cricket, terrorism, and security in contemporary South Asia. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation this evening. And without further ado, I would request you to begin with today's Car1 live lecture. And if people have any question, if participants have any questions for Professor Bandyopadhyay, please feel free to message that in the live Facebook chat. We'll be taking that after the lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ishan. Thank you so much for your generous introduction. I think it's a great opportunity for me to go live on the Car1 Facebook page to interact with the young minds of Indian states, various states of India, and probably a few people outside India. Now, today I'll be talking about cricket, terrorism, and security in contemporary South Asia. I must make one point very clear at the outset. My lens or perspective is that of a student of contemporary history, not of political science, international relations, or media studies. My focal theme is cricket in the context of terrorism and security concerns in contemporary South Asia, with greater emphasis on India and Pakistan. By contemporary South Asia, I refer to 5 prominent cricketing nations or states in the region: India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan in the last 3 to 4 decades in particular. Now, as you all know, cricket has become one of the most abiding national passions in South Asia in the last few decades. It is an emblem of national pride as well as a unifying force in the states of an otherwise politically turbulent, strategically sensitive, and socio-ethnically divided region. I recall Shahryar Khan, the great Pakistani diplomat's famous comment. I quote him: "In India and Pakistan, as indeed all over South Asia, cricket has assumed an all-consuming hold on people from all walks of life, from Quetta camel car driver to Chennai professor, from the Lahore shopkeeper to the Bombay housewife, from the Dhaka student to the Colombo hotel waiter. Cricket has become an overwhelming passion. Its huge energy, like incandescent lava flowing down a live volcano, ready to be channeled towards peace and harmony. 5 countries of the region, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan, now constitute the essence the of the subcontinental cricket culture and economy, being led by India at the international level since the 1990s. However, as I will try to argue, one non-cricketing factor has become central to the game's evolution in South Asia since the 1990s, and particularly in the new century: the question of terrorism and human security. While political violence had been a key feature of social life in most of these countries in the later half of the 20th century, terrorism appeared and grew as a major threat to public life in some of these countries in the last 2 decades of the century, with Sri Lanka providing its initial breeding ground in the 1980s and Afghanistan and Pakistan emerging as its vortex at the turn of the century. The civil war in Sri Lanka, the rise of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and the growth of terrorist and jihadi elements and camps in Pakistan prepared the backdrop of this threatening development. India began to suffer the brunt of terror strikes from the early 1990s. It was only after America suffered the great blow of 9/11, terrorism, considered to be a regional phenomenon till then, became a global concern. Ever since 9/11, its origins became firmly rooted in Islamic fundamentalism practiced by the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and its associate terrorist networks, with the mantle of terrorist activism being ably taken over by the Islamic State in the last decade or so, now being added by some white terrorist groups. Now, this trend of terrorism has had obvious impact upon cricket as well, particularly in South Asia. Interestingly, the period of the rise of growth of terrorism in South Asia coincided with the growth of cricket as a commercialized mass spectator sport in the region. Interestingly, despite the continuous spate of terrorist attacks and activities, cricket's popularity and appeal showed no signs of abatement in South Asia. However, as I would argue, security fears have definitely compromised, halted, and confined the organization of the game in certain states. For the last 10 years or so, Pakistan has been mostly devoid of international cricket, and it plays its home matches mostly in the United Arab Emirates. You can still not imagine organizing an international tournament in Afghanistan, despite the rise of its national cricket team and the growing popularity of the game in the country. And it has happened several times in the past decades that foreign or domestic cricket fixtures had to be postponed in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and even in India owing to terror strikes. On the other hand, cross-border terrorism has radically transformed the nature of cricket relations in the region. Pakistan's alleged hand in serial terrorist attacks in India has bred unending ill will in India-Pakistan relations, thereby straining bilateral cricket for nearly 1 decade, more than a decade now. Yet, I would also argue cricket has survived terrorism and security fears and become integral to public life in all these countries. While terrorism and security concerns continue to remain a real threat to Pakistan and Afghanistan as host nations, and serial terrorist attacks often created problems of security in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka in the recent past, cricket recovers first from the impact of these trends. Needless to mention, the assessment of such impacts has not been uniform for understandable historical reasons. That's why Pakistan and Afghanistan still await their turns to host major test playing nations on the one hand, while India to a large extent and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka to a certain extent remain safer destinations for other cricket playing nations. Now let me start with a brief political backdrop of the growth of terrorism in this part of the world. Political instability and violence became a recurrent feature of public life in the major cricket playing nations of South Asia in the last quarter of the 20th century. For India, it started with the declaration of the emergency in 1975 by Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, followed by the Khalistan movement in the Punjab and Gandhi's assassination by Sikh terrorists in 1983 as a sequel to the suppression of that movement. India's intervention in the civil war to Sri Lanka in the late 1980s led to the assassination of its next Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi in 1991 by Tamil terrorists of Sri Lanka. Secessionist movements in the northeast and Maoist insurgencies in eastern India also bred political violence in these decades. Finally, with continuous infiltration and terrorist activities from Pakistan-occupied Kashmir to Jammu Kashmir, since the 1950s, India began to face serial terrorist attacks, mostly engineered by elements from Pakistan from the early 1990s. Pakistan, on the other hand, has been an unstable state since its birth. Playing love and hate with democracy, the country has mostly remained under authoritarian military rule, and the last quarter of the last century was no exception. Irrespective of whoever be at the helm of affairs, incidents of political violence and terrorism became quite high in the last decades of the 20th century, thanks to the rise of Islamic fundamentalism and Pakistan's direct link with the Taliban of Afghanistan. Pakistan became a fertile breeding and training ground for the Taliban and other related Islamic terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and Lashkar-e-Taiba in the 1990s. Pakistan's prompt recognition of Taliban rule in Afghanistan in 1996 proved this link beyond doubt. Afghanistan became a hotbed of Cold War politics with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. As America began to provide support to anti-Soviet Afghan Mujahideen forces in the 1980s, political skirmishes and killings reached a peak by the end of the decade when the Soviet Union withdrew in 1989. The country was then torn apart by ethnic clashes and terrorist exchanges, ultimately leading to the establishment of Taliban rule in 1996. During these 2 decades, thanks to indiscriminate implantation of landmines by the Soviet Union and its opposition Mujahideens, followed by the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, Afghanistan became one of the most mined countries of the world, taking a heavy toll of lives. More importantly, with the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, the country became the vortex of both fundamentalist Islam and terrorism under the auspices of Al-Qaeda and the leadership of Osama bin Laden, resulting in serial terrorist strikes in South Asia and elsewhere. Although Bangladesh did not incur the wrath of terrorism till the turn of the century, its life since its emergence as an independent state remained somewhat turbulent. While the country became independent after waging a bloody liberation war of 9 months in 1971, its political stability was rudely shattered after the assassination of its outstanding leader Sheikh Mujibur Rahman in 1975, followed by 15 years of autocratic rule under 2 military dictators. Although democracy was restored in 1990, after a prolonged anti-autocracy movement, political clashes and violence became the order of the day in Bangladesh in the 1990s. Besides, Bangladesh also witnessed the growth of Islamic fundamentalism owing to internal support from Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Jamaat-e-Islami and external support and funding from Pakistan and Afghanistan and some Arab countries. For many, it became a safe breeding ground and passage for regional terrorist groups. Finally, Sri Lanka experienced a different kind of political tension emanating from severe ethnic strife between the Sinhalese and the Tamils since its independence in 1948. As the Sinhalese-dominated Sri Lankan government failed to come up with any political solution, Tamil separatism took the form of a violent secessionist movement and led to the formation of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Elam, a militant outfit known more popularly as LTTE in 1975. The LTTE fought a prolonged battle against the state for the creation of a separate Tamil state. This led to a civil war in Sri Lanka with militant attacks, suicide bombings, and terrorist strikes gaining in momentum all over Sri Lanka since the late 1970s and continuing till 2009 when the LTTE was finally suppressed by the army. Now, what becomes clear from this above discussion is the fact that security concerns bred by political violence and terrorist activities began to emerge as an important factor in the public life of South Asian cricket-playing nations in the last quarter of the 20th century. In particular, serial terrorist activities and military ambushes injuring and killing people in large numbers made security fears an everyday reality in Sri Lanka since the 1980s. Life in Afghanistan, on the other hand, remained mostly unstable and insecure throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Afghanistan faced international isolation due to sanctions against Taliban rule since 1996. While India began to suffer terrorist attacks since the early 1990s, Pakistan became the nurturing ground of key terrorist groups operating in South Asia and spreading networks across the world, thereby making the country no less unsafe. Bangladesh, of course, became known for everyday political clashes and strikes since 1991. However, the Western powers in general and America in particular, despite several signals in the form of failed and foiled bids of terrorist groups and actual attacks on their embassies and elsewhere, failed to appreciate the writing on the wall. The failure of American intelligence became clear on 11 September 2001, as all of you know, when Osama bin Laden's Al-Qaeda demolished the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center and damaged a part of the Pentagon. The global war on terrorism was declared by President Bush of America, and the definition of security haunted by the spectre of terrorism underwent an instant transformation everywhere in the world. South Asia became the center of gravity of international politics, while terrorism began to send its ripples to other developed Western nations, including England, France, Germany, and Spain, since the beginning of the 21st century. In South Asia itself, Pakistan's image was tarnished for its alleged link with the Taliban, although Pakistan was forced to allow America to use her land as a base of military operations against the Taliban. With the end of Taliban rule in Afghanistan in December 2001, the country started its tortuous journey into the path of stability, democratization, and reconstruction that still elude her. Pakistan became a hub of terrorist groups, thereby making its own people vulnerable to terrorist attacks. India became a ready target of these terrorist groups as well, and the terrorist strikes on both the civilians and the military still remain a major security concern. This made a huge impact on South Asian regional security and India-Pakistan relations. Bangladesh too came to face a series of terrorist activities and attacks in the post 9/11 period. While Sri Lanka became apparently relieved of terrorist activities after the dissipation of the LTTE in 2009, new forms of terrorism have surfaced there in recent times. Overall, South Asia has had a complex history of political violence and terrorist activism over the past 4 decades, raising security concerns in its public life and interstate relations. The case-specific scenarios of the cricket-playing states of South Asia pose concerns over foreign engagement and travel to these countries from time to time, although this has never been uniform in nature. Now, let me come to very briefly state how the challenge of terrorism and security began to affect cricket field from the 1980s onwards. It is the cultural and commercial significance of cricket in South Asia which makes the sport a ready target of terrorism. Incidentally, cricket's rising popularity and its successful commercialization since the 1980s coincided with the rising tide of political violence and terrorism in parts of South Asia, where the game became an integral part of popular life and culture. The last 2 decades of the 20th century witnessed the rise and domination of the three giants of South Asian cricket: India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Bangladesh also entered the world cricket stage at the turn of the century, while Afghanistan has become a rising cricket power in the last 1 decade. The history of cricket's tryst with terrorism in South Asia goes back to the 1980s, particularly with the rise of LTTE as a major terrorist outfit in Sri Lanka. To give you some examples of how things went on in the 1980s and 90s, on 21st April 1987, a car bomb killed more than 100 people at a bus station in Sri Lanka. As a result, the ongoing three-test series between the touring New Zealand and Sri Lanka was reduced to 1 test. 5 years later, the New Zealand cricket team again faced a dilemma as a suicide bomb attack by a Tamil rebel killed 4 people outside the team hotel on 16 November 1992. 5 players and the team's coach returned home on compassionate grounds after the incident. Finally, in 1996, cricket teams from Australia and the West Indies refused to play their preliminary World Cup matches in Colombo a week after a huge bomb blast there killed 80 people and injured more than 1,200. However, India and Pakistan together played a solidarity cricket match against Sri Lanka in Colombo to allay fears from the minds of the touring teams about the safety of cricketers in Sri Lanka. In July 2001, New Zealand cricket team tour again coincided with a suicide attack by Tamil Tigers, which closed Colombo's international airport. The attack claimed 14 lives, while 12 more got wounded in the pre-drawn attack. It was, however, the Al-Qaeda air attack on World Trade Center on 11 September 2001 that changed the security scenario and paradigm forever in South Asia in general and Pakistan in particular. Immediately after 2001, most of the international cricket tours in Pakistan got cancelled owing to security concerns, and Pakistan had to play their home series at neutral venues like Sharjah or Dubai. On 8th May 2002, New Zealand called off its ongoing cricket tour after a car bomb explosion in Karachi in front of the hotel where the visitors were staying, killing 13 people, including the team physiotherapist and 11 French Navy experts. October same year, Pakistan played a home series against Australia at Sharjah after the latter's refusal to tour over security concerns. Since May 2002 incident, among countries from outside South Asia, Australia and New Zealand never toured the country, while England, West Indies and South Africa played only once each in Pakistan. While the prospects of an Australian tour and the organization of the Champions Trophy in 2008 became very bright to be played in Pakistan by the end of 2007, a series of major terrorist incidents upset everything. This fresh spate of terrorism began with the assassination of two-time Prime Minister of Pakistan Benazir Bhutto in a shooting and suicide bombing in Rawalpindi's Liaquat Bagh, killing at least 20 other people and injuring many. It was followed by hundreds of killings in resultant internal repercussions and election-related violence, thereby gradually making the future of international fixtures grim in Pakistan. On 11th March 2008, at least 28 people were killed and more than 200 wounded in twin suicide bombings in the eastern Pakistan city of Lahore. One of the attacks ripped apart Federal Investigation Agency building, killing 21, including 16 policemen. The other one hit the posh locality of Model Town, exploding close to Bilawal House, associated with the Pakistan People's Party leaders Benazir Bhutto and her husband Asif Ali Zardari. Immediately, Cricket Australia postponed its forthcoming tour after taking independent security advice. As James Sutherland, the Cricket Australia boss, said, I quote, "We have left no stone unturned in trying to ensure that the tour could proceed as planned. But at the end of the day, for us, the safety and security of our employees must come first." In fact, by the end of July 2008, Australia and New Zealand players were advised not to travel to Pakistan for the Champions Trophy, raising the prospect of a possible boycott of the Elite 8-team one-day tournament. New Zealand also cancelled its one-day series in Pakistan. In August 2008, the International Cricket Council postponed the Champions Trophy for 13 months. After 5 of the 8 teams confirmed they would not send their teams due to security concerns. However, Cricket Australia decided to go ahead with the India tour days after a series of bomb blasts in New Delhi on 13 September 2008. 20 people were killed and more than 90 injured in the blasts, which happened a week before the Australian cricketers were scheduled to arrive. Pakistan cricket authorities immediately accused their Australian counterparts of double standards. However, Australia probably duly appreciated the difference in security situations of the two countries and decided to go ahead with the India tour. On 17th August 2005, Bangladesh was rocked for the first time by a countrywide series of bomb blasts orchestrated by two proscribed Islamic militant organizations, the Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh (JMB) and the Jagrata Muslim Janata Bangladesh (JMJB). The explosion of more than 450 bombs within a period of less than 1 hour sent ripples to every sphere of life. These events were followed by 4 incidents of suicide attacks over the next several months, which killed at least 30 people and wounded 15 more. The victims included judges, lawyers, policemen, and journalists. In the next 1 year or so, the government, forced to recognize the existence of a strong Islamic militancy network across the country, began to take strong action against the militants. The rise of Islamic politics had been a reality in Bangladesh since independence, but the strong presence of Islamic militancy was also confirmed after these incidents. Against these odds, playing and hosting international cricket became a challenge which Bangladesh accepted and negotiated. There had been occasional interruptions by terrorist attacks, but a stable polity and administration in the last 1 decade or so made sure that these does not become recurrent and cricket does not suffer as a result. Afghanistan has been a hotbed of political turmoil since the late 1970s. This turmoil from time to time was accompanied by tribal clashes, religious dissensions, social cleavages, and cultural purges. The takeover of Kabul by the Taliban in 1996 marked the beginning of the stoppage of most of the popular cultural activities, including sports. The end of Taliban rule in 2001 after the 9/11 incident raised hope for a restoration of peace and security, as it was followed by a constitutional process to establish democracy in the country. This provided a booster for a renewal of interests in modern sports like football, cricket, judo, or athletics. For Afghan men, sport was to become an arena for the assertion of national identity. Cricket, in that context, took off as a popular sport very quickly. In fact, the Afghan refugees who had gone to Pakistan during the 1990s and imbibed the game there came back to their home country after 2001 and played a leading role in popularizing the game in Afghanistan. However, security remained one of the major predicaments for cricket to develop in Afghanistan. Apart from common threats to human security, especially in the regions, landmines constituted another source of insecurity for infrastructure building for cricket in post-2001 Afghanistan. The instrumentality of cricket in contemporary Afghan society is also linked with the nation's urge for peace, development, and progress, as Afghan youths have increasingly preferred to replace guns with bats and bullets with balls. The media, since the fall of Taliban rule, have too represented cricket as a viable means of cultural regeneration, a medium of social unity, and a vehicle of peace. In this context, Afghanistan has already asserted its presence in the international cricket map. While the game has helped soothe the differences of various sorts and add prop to the nation-building process in contemporary Afghanistan, hosting cricket events in the country still remains a distant possibility due to the security situation serially endangered by the terror strikes of the Taliban from time to time. Yet, the Afghan youth and the national team have overall overcome all odds to show how a country under war on terror can rise to international standard and fame. Excuse me. Let me now come to the way security fears and terrorist activities have influenced the central theme of South Asian cricket relations, India-Pakistan. The central attraction of South Asian cricket has been the mother of all battles, India-Pakistan cricket rivalry, as you all admit. In fact, the cricketing relations between India and Pakistan signify different meanings and convey different messages to different people across the subcontinent. Nationalism, communalism, terrorism, war, infiltration, insurgency, diplomacy, peace, election, cultural exchange, commercial boom, cricketing conflict, and so on. However, in striking contrast to the continuing political tension between the two countries, the relation between the two cricket boards remained more or less friendly at the international level till 2008. With the growing importance of cricket as a confidence-building measure in India-Pakistan relations, questions of diplomacy, terrorism, and security have always influenced India-Pakistan bilateral cricket. The Indian team's tour of Pakistan in 2004 can be considered by many, in fact, was considered by many as part of a broader diplomatic initiative to stabilize India-Pakistan relations after a protracted bitter spell of political relations since 1999, and particularly after the 9/11 incident. Naturally, security became a core concern of both the governments as well as of the cricket boards. I will briefly talk about this particular tour and its ramifications in terms of security and terrorism. Now, despite the enormous media hype on the tour of 2004, representing it as a diplomatic tool or confidence building measure in the normalization of relations between the two countries, it is important to keep in mind the confusion and hesitancy, speculation and sensationalism that preceded it. With the escalation of militancy in Kashmir in the mid-1990s, culminating in the Kargil War in 1999, just after the conclusion of Pakistan tour of India, the Indian government imposed an embargo on India-Pakistan cricket series for a while. All through 2003, the debate on the advisability of playing a series in Pakistan in 2004 recurred on the pages of newspapers and magazines and on TV channels. Even when the political and diplomatic relationships between the two countries improved enough to suggest a resumption of cricketing relations towards the end of 2003, the actual decision to clear India's tour, albeit again manufactured very smoothly by the government, was fraught with many dilemmas. Rahul Bhattacharya, the renowned journalist who visited Pakistan on that tour, captured nicely the sentiments of the Indian cricketers preceding the decision to clear the tour. I quote, "And so a montage of mental associations, assassination beads on the president, abduction plans for star cricketers, nukes in who knows whose hands," unquote. In fact, every member of the Indian squad signed a letter to the cricket board at night on 14 December 2003 during the Adelaide Test against Australia, expressing his reservations over the proposed tour to Pakistan 2 months later. The letter, however, was never sent. Instead, it was leaked to a journalist who would bring it to the attention of not just the cricket board, but the entire country. John Wright, the Indian coach at that time, writes in his autobiography, I quote, "When we were in Australia, news came through of an assassination attempt on the Pakistani President General Parvez Musharraf, and that caused a renewed flurry of doubt. The players had understandable concerns. They wanted assurances that if the tour went ahead, there would be appropriate security measures, and they would be going as cricketers, not as pawns in a diplomatic game." However, the Pakistan President Parvez Musharraf, well aware of the wonders of a safe event of this magnitude could do for the international image of Pakistan, assured the Indian team of the highest level security, the one enjoyed by him. The media tirelessly speculated during the months preceding the actual official decision to clear the tour that the tour was in serious doubt. While security reasons were cited in a media campaign pressing for postponement, the real fear in many circles was that any untoward incident during the series would spoil the feel-good factor before the Lok Sabha elections. There were several arguments both in favor of and against the proposed tour. Some held that the risk was simply not worth it. An attack or assault on the team by motivated parties would in a stroke destroy the peace process and set off a series of calamities. Some reasoned that not touring would be the real sabotage of the peace process, preventing, as it would, the rare opportunity of thousands of people meeting thousands of people across the border and watching a game. Yet some others argued that it was precisely because of the danger posed by thousands of people meeting thousands of people and watching a game that the tour must proceed. The departure for the tour was preceded by two major briefings for the entire team: Ministry of External Affairs briefing and security briefing. While the ministry spokesperson reminded the members of the touring team that the tour was an important part of this India-Pakistan revival, John Wright recollected nicely how the head of the VIP security provision in the Ministry of Home Affairs, Yashovardhan Ayad, who had made an inspection visit to Pakistan, briefed the team on security arrangements. I quote, "We were given a 16-point list of do's and do nots, which included not discussing plans, programs, and engagements in public, not having a routine of going to the same place at the same time every day, and taking precautions before opening an unidentified mail." As the Indian team reached Lahore, Wright's description of the presidential level security provided to the Indian on tour clearly indicated these rigidities. I quote Wright, "Our convoy from Lahore airport included an ambulance and jammer cars to block radio frequencies in case of remote controlled bombs along the route. There was also a decoy bus that took a different route to our hotel. The security arrangements meant that there was no date time. When we went to practice, they simply blocked off the route so that what was normally a 30-minute start chug through traffic became a 10-minute dash. It was the same on the return trip. And it didn't matter whether we finished practice 20 minutes earlier or later than we had indicated. When we were ready to go, they closed the roads and we went. We were surrounded by tough-looking from the Punjab Police's elite squad. They carried machine guns and wore black t-shirts with the No Fear logo on them. The apex of this high-level security at times turned bizarre. As Rahul Bhattacharya shares one unique experience in this context. I quote, "There were reportedly 250 security guards manning the hotel, that is about 15 per player. No access was available naturally to the players' floors, and no other guest was permitted to occupy a room on those floors. Any envelopes addressed to the team, it was said, were to be scanned by a bomb disposal unit. All food for them was to be prepared under the strictest supervision. Still, it did come as a shock when one of the commandos encircling the table in the lobby coffee shop where Saurav Ganguly, sat briefly with a few journalists, asked that the tea be tested before it passes the lips of the captain. A journalist obliged. Yes, we know our place in the world, we lot, unquote. In the light of such security arrangements, it was argued playing each other on a regular basis would definitely minimize, and in fact minimized, in the next few years, the confrontational tension that usually accompanies rare occasions of cricket matches between the two countries. If the two nations play cricket regularly, it seemed in the light of reciprocal cricket tours between the two countries during 2004 to 2007, then perhaps cricket could move from being a metaphor for war to a vehicle of peace. But the real problem originated here. Was it possible to pursue international cricket in Pakistan without fear of life in the light of the security situation prevailing in the country since 2001? Two, while the relation between India and Pakistan cricket boards, BCCI and PCB, was characterized mostly by friendliness and complementarity for a long time, despite several serious occasions of rift between the two countries at the political level, this relation too became strained, first over the concerns of the BCCI regarding the safety of cricketers playing in Pakistan, and the concerns of the Indian government over Pakistan's alleged links with acts of terrorism in India from 2008. The terrorist attacks in Mumbai on 26 November 2008 amply illustrated this chink in the relations between the two cricket boards. It is important to remember that cricket can act as a prop to confidence building only if the neighbors share with each other their concerns of national interest and security. Once one side falters or seems to falter in this approach to confidence building, the entire process of peace building receives a blow. In such situations, cricket exchanges between India and Pakistan also come to a halt. This happened in 1999 after the Kargil War and in 2001 after the terrorist attack on Indian Parliament House. It happened again in the aftermath of Mumbai terrorist attacks on 26 November 2008 as substantial evidence of Pakistan's links to this attack was detected. Hence, the Indian government promptly cancelled Indian cricket team's scheduled tour of Pakistan in February 2009. India hosted Pakistan in World Cup semi-final in 2011 and for a one-day series in December 2012. The latter was followed by the beheading of 3 Indian soldiers on the line of control. Since 2014, there have been a series of terror strikes on the military and civilians by terrorists supported by elements from Pakistan, with the result that the Indian government has imposed a ban on bilateral cricket, hosting or visiting Pakistan. This is in line with the point made by India's Sports Minister, M.S. Gill, in calling off the government's permission for the tour in 2009. I quote, "You can't have one team coming from Pakistan to kill people in our country and another team going from India to play cricket there," unquote. Therefore, unless Pakistan takes sincere and reciprocal steps in restraining terrorist activities on bases, cricket's viability as confidence building measure would not be sustained in the long run. So let me focus more on Mumbai 2611 because this was the beginning of the rupture in India-Pakistan cricket relations for a long time to come. When the Mumbai incident took place on 26 November 2008, the English cricket team was touring India. As the militants stormed the Indian financial capital, killing about 170 people in a series of attacks, and the gunmen hit high-profile targets including the Taj Mahal Hotel, where foreign teams normally stay, the English cricket team returned home from India on 28 November on security grounds. Two major sequels followed the attack. First, Quite expectedly, India called off their Pakistan cricket tour after the government had refused to permission due to tension between the nuclear-armed neighbors over the terrorist attack in Mumbai. Interestingly enough, despite BCCI's warnings about security situation in Pakistan, Sri Lanka agreed to step in to tour Pakistan in February-March 2009. Second and more important, despite wider security fears emanating from Mumbai attack, the England and Wales Cricket Board decided in early December to send their cricket team play in the test series in India. In fact, the Mumbai attack excited a much awaited transformation in the paranoid mindset of the Western governments, cricket boards and media that used to suffer from a climate of prejudice and fear about terrorist actions and suicide attacks. This mindset, according to Michael Roberts, is marked by a poverty of analysis and indulges in sweeping generalizations that are inattentive to the limitations of militant organizations, the regional differentiation in their capacities and their selectivity of targets. As Gary Kirsten, coach of the Indian cricket team in 2009, remarked in that context, I quote, "There is no way that security can be guaranteed wherever you are in the world, but you can't keep saying no. There are terrorism threats everywhere. Even the UK is not immune from them," unquote. Prime Minister Gordon Brown's gentle suggestion to the England and Wales Cricket Board that it should consider a return to India to play their scheduled test matches on a revamped program was an indication of the strengthening resolve to refuse to kowtow to global threat of military violence. It is also important to note that the paranoid mindset towards global terror did not apply the same logic to the moment of the 7th July 2005 atrocities in London, when the Australian cricket team drove in to play their test match at Lord's from 21st July. A former chief of the British Civil Special Services stated in the aftermath of the Mumbai terror attack, anonymously, that the United Kingdom itself would not be prepared to handle the type of attack that Mumbai weathered. Yet, this understanding still did not have too many sympathizers in the Western world. This scheme of evaluation of terrorism and security in relation to cricket began to undergo major transformation since 2008. As India began to offer unthinkable riches from its wealthy vault of the unveiling of the Indian Premier League or IPL extravaganza from April 2008, cricketers from Australia, New Zealand and South Africa, earlier averse to visiting South Asian countries in the smallest prospects of security concern, decided to change their mindset and approach towards terrorist activities and security concerns in India. To give one example, the Australian and South African players on the Rajasthan Royal squad playing in the IPL ultimately decided to adhere to their contracts and play on in Jaipur and elsewhere in India after 8 serial blasts rocked the city on 13th May 2008. To many of us, the England cricket team's return to play the test series in December 2008 may therefore seem to be a continuity of this changed mindset molded powerfully by Indian cricket team's strong economic clout. But one should not discount the influence of such considerations as those embodied in Prime Minister Brown's intervention. In a statement following the Mumbai attacks, Kevin Peterson, English captain, said, I quote, "We are going to demonstrate in India that we are showing our support to play test match cricket. I think it's very important we go and rub shoulder to shoulder with the Indian people in their time of need," unquote. The point I want to make is, would the English captain or cricket authority have done the same thing if the attack took place in Pakistan? The answer is certainly no. It became imperative by the end of 2000s for the cricket playing nations outside South Asia to make a conscious decision about who could certainly be relied upon to provide protection in case of a terrorist attack. The decision was made in two extremes after the attack on Sri Lankan cricketers in Lahore on 3rd March 2009. 6 Sri Lankan cricketers and their British assistant coach were wounded and 5 police officers were killed when a dozen gunmen attacked their bus as it drove under police escort to a stadium in the Pakistani city of Lahore. The test series was immediately cancelled and the cricketers were flown back home. Already in February, the ICC, International Cricket Council, decided to move the Champions Trophy out of Pakistan after many members expressed reservations about touring the country, which became amply justified after the Lahore tragedy. The incident also nullified the hypothesis propagated by the influential figures like Imran Khan that cricketers would never be attacked because they were so uniformly popular in Pakistan. As Kumar Sangakkara, A key member of the team put things in perspective sometimes after the attack. I quote, "We have all had to grow up a bit more and not be so naive to think that sportsmen are somehow immune from the troubles of the world. The Munich Olympics were probably the last time a sports team had been targeted like this. We lived in a bubble thinking we were untouchable. That has gone now. The sense of security has disappeared. These targets, these threats are real and not just confined to one section of society." Unquote. One pertinent question that was being asked everywhere after the incident was why cricket or cricketers became a target of the terrorists. According to Henry Clark, the attack is an attempt to instill widespread terror through an attack the terrorists know will be widely publicized. In short, an attempt to effectively terrify local Pakistanis by attempting to kill foreign cricketers. He further asserted, international cricket no longer possible in Pakistan. Therefore, we should stop accusing foreign teams of discriminating against Pakistan vis-a-vis India. The question here is of the survival of Pakistan, not of cricket. Unquote. Motives of terrorist organizations are to get maximum publicity for their demands and maximum exposure for their efforts. Sending strong message to the world, cricket coverage may be the ideal platform. Harun Logat, the CEO of the International Cricket Council at that time stated, I quote, "It is very obvious that the landscape and the thinking has changed dramatically." Unquote. Lalit Mansingh, the former Indian ambassador to Washington and London and one of India's senior diplomats, said on television immediately after the attack on that fateful morning that the attack on a cricket team was the best way to destroy the confidence, not just between India and Pakistan, but all of South Asia. The Lahore attacks were an indication of how rapidly Pakistan is rolling over down the precipice. These are the signals of the creeping Talibanization of Pakistan, said Mansingh. The Pakistanis also became anxiety-stricken. Post-Lahore attack, popular Pakistani websites and blogs were abuzz with comments on the attacks. Some blamed the CIA, Mossad, and Indian intelligence agency RAW, but a large part of the reactions carried shame, anxiety, anger at their own government, and helplessness, and a dismal realization that no international cricket would be played in Pakistan for a long time. Not being able to watch live the best international players on their own soil was surely disappointing for Pakistani fans of the game. But more disturbing was the fact that the terrorists took control of something that was rarely dragged into the circle of terrorism or religion this way before: cricket. According to Mansingh, I quote, "It's a signal to the rest of the world saying, keep your hands off Pakistan. We, the terrorists, are in control. We can do anything at any time." Unquote. Pakistan's image as a stable political entity began to face unpleasant questions because of its alleged links with the acts of global terrorism since the destruction of the World Trade Center on 11 September. Post 9/11 incident, most cricket-playing nations except the South Asian states refused to play in Pakistan for security concerns. As a result, cricket began to suffer not only as a game, but also as commerce and culture. The Pakistan Cricket Board had to incur huge losses due to a series of cancellation of visiting teams' tours, which included Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, West Indies, and finally India. As cricket exchanges between Pakistan and other South Asian nations depend mainly on bilateral relations based on reciprocity of political goodwill on both sides, the South Asian neighbors continued to play in Pakistan to allay security fears embedded in Western mind. However, in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks in Mumbai, the process of confidence building between India and Pakistan received a major blow, as evidences clearly pointed to Pakistan's hands in the plot of the terror. Finally, the terrorist attack on the Sri Lankan cricketers and officials at the Gaddafi Stadium, Lahore, on 3rd March 2009 could be regarded as the last nail in the coffin of Pakistan as a host cricketing nation. This proved to be a major blow to the cricketing solidarity of South Asia as well. With the decision of the International Cricket Council in April 2009 to cancel the World Cup matches in Pakistan, tension became manifest in the organization of the 2011 ICC World Cup to be hosted jointly by India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. In fact, in the aftermath of the Lahore attack, Pakistan's lack of credibility in the avowed objective of containing terrorism, the strong presence and growing influence of the Taliban in the country, and security threats emanating from continuous acts of terror in the country posed serious concerns for the nation in any efforts to recreate its image as peaceful democratic society where cricket could be pursued without fear. The Lahore attack might not have signaled the end of Pakistani cricket, but it marked the end of, for some time, the kind of high-profile international cricket in Pakistan that its fiercely loyal home crowds love to see. The attack cost Pakistan the rights to host the 2011 World Cup because of uncertainty in security situation there. In fact, Ehsan Mani, the former ICC president, sounded the warning quite clearly after India had cancelled its tour in December 2008. I quote Ehsan Mani, "What I fear is that Pakistan is being pushed to the brink of isolation and Pakistan will have to do something about it," unquote. Unfortunately, Pakistan could not do anything about it. Rather, the Lahore attack pointed to major security lapses on the part of the government. As the ICC President David Morgan said in a statement, I quote, "It is a regrettable decision, but our number one priority is to create certainty and deliver a safe, secure, and successful event. And the uncertainty created by events within Pakistan created huge question mark over our ability to do just that," unquote. The cumulative impact of so much security-related disruption not only damaged the prestige of the game in the country, but also hit both with a huge loss of revenue. To put it very simply, as Sarfaraz Nawaz, the former Pakistani captain, said, I quote, "Cricket in Pakistan is over for some years," unquote. However, the ICC decision to remove Pakistan from the organization of the World Cup elicited contrasting responses from cricketers and cricket fans, which actually summed up the grim realities of cricket both as a game and as commerce in Pakistan in the context of growing concerns over terrorism and security. Zahir Abbas, the legendary Pakistani cricketer, strongly disapproved of the ICC decision to take the World Cup out of Pakistan, putting the onus primarily on India. But we have multiple comments in response to this particular decision, from which I would like to mention one particular comment by a non-resident Pakistani living in the United States of America, which probably provided the best possible appreciation of the situation. As a Pakistani living in the US and a cricket fan, I am in a state of total shock and disbelief, not at the decision made by the ICC, but at the reactions of former Pakistani cricketers and the PCB. Exactly what kind of massacre needs to occur before they realize that Pakistan is just not a safe place to host events at this point in time? If the PCB cannot provide competent security to one visiting team, they certainly will not be able to successfully negotiate the security of a dozen teams. And let's not forget about the hundreds of thousands of cricket fans as well. Pakistan could have cleared all these fears and doubts with the recent tour of Sri Lanka. They failed. I understand that no country is 100% safe, but any country where a dozen terrorists sporting machine guns and rocket launchers can breach through president-style security, manage to kill innocent civilians, injure foreign sportsmen, and to make matters worse, successfully escape without even a scar, is just not safe. With a drastic deterioration in human security in Pakistan in the 2000s, owing to a spate of terrorist attacks, not only cricket-playing nations, but any sports persons from any part of the globe probably thought twice before visiting the country. The basic question of human security even transformed the contours of cricketing relations within South Asia. South Asian cricket-playing nations, after the Lahore attack, came to appreciate the difficulty of playing in Pakistan as the cricketers' lives were at stake. As a result, the cause of solidarity in South Asian cricket faced the danger of being undone by the spectre of terrorism and concerns of security. Even India could easily point to security fears rather than to strains in political or diplomatic relations as the most plausible reason for not playing in Pakistan. But India, along with Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, could not also remain complacent in this regard, either as terrorism loomed large in the entire subcontinent as a whole. The respective governments had the great responsibility to ensure that what happened in Pakistan does not happen in the countries they govern. Otherwise, the future of cricket in South Asia would be in serious jeopardy. Let me come to let me sum up briefly how the spectre of terrorism and security have influenced cricket culture, cricket commerce, and cricket relations in South Asia, and what about the future. The reasons for the failure of South Asian nations to mitigate the spectre of terrorism have been manifold. The lack of political will in Pakistan, the lack of political stability and infrastructure in Afghanistan, the lack of effective intelligence, probably to a certain extent in India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh, and so on. Yet the condition in this regard has been far better in the last three countries compared to that of Pakistan and Afghanistan. In the aftermath of Lahore attack, the disparity in the assessment, in appreciating the impacts of terror strikes, and in the decisions of foreign countries to send their teams or the ICC to host international fixtures became apparent. Pakistan under Imran Khan, former cricket captain and present Prime Minister of the country, is still fighting its own shadow of terrorism and trying to assure the world of its safer security situation. Of late, it's good to see that there has been a lot of talks about the return of cricket to Pakistan, as some of its South Asian neighbors, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, again showed solidarity by visiting the country in 2019-20 to play bilateral series. Before this, only Zimbabwe played a series in Pakistan in 2015. However, the other major test playing nations are yet to return to Pakistan. On the other hand, the situation in Afghanistan has definitely improved over the years, but is still not conducive to hosting foreign cricket tours or international tournaments because of the continuing terror strikes by the Taliban and the failure of the government to ensure security and stability in the country by negotiating the Taliban constitutionally. There have, of course, been intermittent terrorist attacks and security problems in India, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka in the last 1 decade or so, but the governments of these states have shown much greater ability and resilience to mitigate such crises. However, one major problem continues to jeopardize South Asian cricket: absence of India-Pakistan bilateral cricket. Given Pakistan's continuous support to Kashmiri militants and its alleged links and hands in serial terror attacks in various parts of India in the past decade, and India's recent military responses to such attacks have embittered their political relations to such an extent as to make any bilateral cricket nearly impossible in the near future. It is important to understand that unless Pakistan shows real urge to mitigate the evil of terrorism and share the concerns of its neighbors, the role of cricket, as I have already mentioned, as a tool of confidence building or a bridge of peace, will continue to remain illusory in nature. No India-Pakistan cricket means the absence of the greatest attraction of South Asian cricket and of one of the most enduring sporting rivalries of the world. To conclude, I have tried to show that terrorism generated diverse responses in the domain of cricket in South Asia in the last 3 decades or so. It posed serious hindrances to cricket at a time when the game became a central part of public life and an emblem of national identity in the region. Cricket's massification in South Asia went hand in hand with the growing stature of terrorism and concerns of basic human security. In the post-9/11 world, where terrorism was given a global status, South Asia fought its own battle to come to terms with terror strikes, evolving diverse patterns to combat the same and make life safer on its soil. The tortuous process went through cancellation of foreign cricket tours, postponement of international fixtures, and stoppage in domestic tournaments and matches. Despite such interruptions, cricket continued and continues to be a mass spectator sport in South Asia. With the serial failure of 2 focal areas of the region, Pakistan and Afghanistan, to curb terrorist groups and bases, along with the growing tide of right-wing politics across this region, terrorism is most likely to continue to act as a challenge even to the future development of the game in parts of South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for this very interesting and very influential lecture that you have presented on the cricket and the impact of security and terrorism, the impact of the worries of security and the danger of terrorism over cricket in South Asia. And we have 3 questions from the audience, and the first question is, and I think you have already answered one of those questions, that is, do you want to see or should India and Pakistan put their political tensions aside and resume the spirit of cricket on a healthy level? So towards the end of the lecture, you definitely answered this question. Pankaj Yadav asked that, do you think sports should become involved in political matters between countries?
Yes, I think both the questions are interrelated. Sport has always been connected with politics. If you think that sport can be isolated or diverse from politics, we are living in a fool's paradise, because sport means politics, sport means commerce, sport means culture, and in countries like India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, cricket becomes a matter of life and death at times. You can easily recollect the historic moment that came in Indian cricket a few days back. But the first question, which I think is interesting and intriguing as well, is that the question whether should India play Pakistan or not. I have tried to give an overview of how things have developed over the last 2 decades. But if you ask me the question as a person, as an Indian, I would say that whenever there is a possibility of using cricket as an instrument to create a peaceful ambience for or create an ambience of discussion among the two countries, that should always be tried. And cricket probably acts to that extent. It cannot resolve the outstanding enmity in the relations between the two countries, but it can definitely play a role in soothing that relations, creating ambience for talks and discussions.
Indeed. And Sunetra Mitra asks that if cricket or sport is depoliticized, then perhaps the terror threat can somewhat ignored. So, what's your take on that?
Uh, Again, it is not possible to depoliticize cricket or sport, because, as you know, that since the very beginning of the journey of modern sport, as in the international space, it has always been politicized, whether in terms of national identity, whether in terms of international image building, or even whether in terms of certain forces like regionalism, communalism, and so on. But the terrorists probably look at sports from a different angle. They want publicity, and from the 1980s onwards, if you look at Sri Lanka, the LTT's main concern was to draw attention to their demands, to their causes, and probably in some way or other, their attacks were connected with the cricket tours that were going at that point of time in Sri Lanka. So the way terrorists look at cricket or sports or sporting events is probably something different from the way we associate sport with politics.
Indeed. So for them, it is like a political stunt, publicity stunt. So thank you so much, sir, for delivering this lecture this evening on cricket, terrorism, security in contemporary South Asia. It was truly an honor to host you this evening, and we hope to see this lecture in a form of a book that you are working on. And we hope you great luck with the book. Thank you so much once again, and we hope to see you again on our platform very soon with the book. And thank you very much, everybody who joined us live on Facebook. The video will be available on YouTube very soon by tonight. So do share, do check it out, do like, do comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ishan and Karwan, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, sir.